because it was the premier, it was the marquee beat, and women weren't given that. The women who were starting out in sports writing at that point, and they were just starting out, were usually given either hockey or basketball. They weren't given baseball. Baseball was the one where there were a lot of older men who had been baseball writers for a long, long time. So when I appear, and again, it's so different from today, but when I would appear, the issue of how do I start forming these reporting relationships with the ball players is a really interesting one, because there's no roadmap. There's really not been a lot of women. There have been a few who have covered games occasionally, but no one who's really going to be up there almost every day. I mean, as I was either, because I was based in New York, I was either at Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium almost every day, whether the National League or the American League was in town. And every time a different team came to town, they were often seeing a woman for the first time as well. Well, add to that, I really felt both timid and intimidated by being the only in most cases. And, there were a lot of men who didn't like the fact that there was a new woman on the block. I mean, this signaled to them a sea change. So I wasn't warmly greeted by all of my, quote, colleagues or peers. There were some who were just wonderful and have remained friends to this day, but it certainly wasn't a universal feeling. So it took me a lot longer than it probably would take a woman reporter going in today to feel like I had the self-confidence to be able to really do that. The only access I had to the ball players was during batting practice. Well, batting practice for them is batting practice. It's not talking practice, it's batting practice. The male reporters would see the players in the locker room before the game. That's when they talked to them. They did try to talk, and some of them would talk in the dugout, but it wasn't like the only time they had. For me, it was the only time, so that was another different dimension to it. Again, it was the first time I was reporting a sport ever in my life, and here I was representing Sports Illustrated. Here I was the only woman. You don't want to make a fool of yourself. I mean, you're already under suspicion that you might not know what you should know to be doing what you're doing. So I would scrutinize myself a lot in terms of kind of questions I would ask. I would try to listen very carefully when a group of guys got around a player in sort of a scrum, and try to listen and understand how they asked questions. I would school myself in kind of how they would come back to follow up with questions. But I also knew that as soon as I tried to follow what they were doing, there would be that overlay of gender, and so there was that sense that I had to very early on demonstrate in some way, without being, kind of tedious or boring about it, to a given player, that I knew what I was asking and I knew what I was talking about.